move on to a couple of other topics in the next part of this as well, which is a fascinating listen, and to talk about the different type of practice. You call one of it deliberate practice, and how you have to judge as a coach what you're doing in this situation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's if I start from the very beginning, if that's possible, there's a raft of talent ID books and research out there, and one book that kind of weighed heavily on me was a book called The Talent Code by Daniel Coyle, and it contains a little bit of football, but it's basically about not just sport, even about musicians and all that kind of aspect, and how do they become as good as they are. And he coined, or he certainly used the phrase deliberate practice. So I set about figuring out what that looks like in football on our training pitches. And I guess it's a different, and if we go back to the coaching lens angle on it, we were all probably brought up on, stand there, pass to that cone, move to that player, join the end of the queue. That sort of constant practice, which we call it in the industry, where there's kind of the same things happening all the time. The angle for deliberate soccer practice or deliberate practice in football is that we can use the variableness that football brings. So instead of just working on passing or shooting or crossing or whatever it might be, we're actually building decision making into that. So it's a little complicated to explain, I guess, without diagrams and so on, but it's about layering your sessions with more and more, and critically allowing players to problem solve, to make decisions as they go about it, and just bringing what we practice closer to the reality of the game.
I was very privileged many years ago when Jose Mourinho first went to Chelsea, actually, and I was able to watch part of one of his sessions, and we talked before the session, and he was specifically at that stage, quite early in his first tenure, which was so successful, trying to get players to think for themselves at things he was trying to get them to do.
Yeah, I mean it's... Yeah, absolutely.
It's extraordinary. I mean, he was working with Ashley Cole, and he had this thing where he'd blow the whistle and ask players what were they thinking about, and it could be about anything, not during the session, not necessarily, that they were not feeling great or that they got someone who was sick in their family, or anything. It could be absolutely anything. Yeah. But he sort of worked on it so well that in the end, you began to see how players understood what he wanted and thought their confidence came from them not just understanding it subliminally, but they were actually knowing what to do.
Absolutely, and it's kind of crazy that this conversation even happens in football and happens so much. I mean, I spent a huge amount of time almost trying to convince coaches to use the game as their reference point when they train. So you're not running from cone to cone or doing laps of the pitch and things like that. As coaches, you have to let go. When that whistle blows on a Saturday, it's okay, you have a small impact and you can order people around and all that sort of stuff, but surely the best teams and the best players will play off instinct, rather than passing and following their pass every time they play on a Saturday. They'll pass and stand still, or they'll, if you watch, I always go to Iniesta when I think about this, but if you watch how someone like Iniesta plays, he will pass it to someone's right foot. If they've got pressure from the left, he'll pass it in front of his teammate if he wants them to move forward. He kind of communicates something in his pass, for example. So that deliberate practice on the pitch looks like, well, instead of standing 20 players in a queue to shoot at goal, why don't we get him into some sort of game-like scenario where we've got different angles, we're all involved. Because let's face it, are you really training if you're stood number 20 at the back of the queue? You're basically using 1/20th of your training time to do anything. So it's about using the game, essentially, and what the game is telling us. It's so variable.
I don't think, Ray, I don't think at the top level that's that's changed all that much. I don't know what the other Ray thinks. We were always, as a fullback coming through the youth system as an apprentice, it was like, right, okay, you get the ball, these are your three options, and this is your last option, if you've got it. Now, when it comes to you've got to make that decision for yourself.
Sure.
And you've got to work it out, as it comes to you. And I think when we went around sort of Europe, looking at academies, we didn't find that the technical ability we thought was going to be much better in Holland, in Spain, than the English players. And we were actually really, really surprised that actually it wasn't. But their game knowledge and their understanding of how to play the game was way ahead. That was the main difference. We all thought that, because of Spain play 4v4 and Holland play total football, and they were going to be so much technically better and they could do a million keepy-ups and all the rest of it. But that wasn't the case. But it was, like I say, you're talking about, it was their game knowledge, their ability to think on their feet, to know where the next pass needs to go before it arrives, where to move before it happened. Their understanding of the game, their ability to learn, in real game time, real game practices, was higher than a lot of the English players of the same age.
Yeah, for sure. I think you're absolutely right. I think when you go back to what you were saying there, you receive the ball in this situation, you've got your three options, as you say. Well, if that second option is whatever, a pass into a midfielder, is that midfielder under pressure? Do you need to literally strike the ball harder because you're under pressure, or there's bodies in the way? Do you need to lift it? Do you need to play to his right foot, to his left foot? All those kind of things. You can't teach all that in straight lines. And okay, for the first 5 minutes we're going to pass to a left foot, for the next 5 minutes you're going to pass to a right foot, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that. It's impossible. What we can do is put players in situations where those decisions are made live, and we put the players under pressure in that good sense, to make those decisions all the time. And if we go back to the concept behind the talent code, was that the more you practice something, the better wired it becomes in your brain. Well, the more you practice your decision making, the more decisions you make, the better technical, tactical player you become all at once.
I really enjoyed that. I mean, and that book was, it's only a short read, isn't it? It's not a particularly thick book, and there's a little bit of the 10,000 hours things in there, but it's the way that professional people train their minds and how they do it. They only practice perfectly. They don't go out and they don't hit. A tennis player wouldn't go out and hit just 10 hours worth of tennis balls and hit most of them badly. Federer and Nadal, they do 50 minutes perfectly. The moment they stop, because then if not, you're training the body to do and the mind to do bad things.
But during the game today, I'll ask you this as well, but isn't the game today changing? Because, watching, whatever league you want to look at the moment, it is ball retention. What they talk about more is keeping possession of the ball, where when you looked at Iniesta and players, Xavi, players like that, and in my time when I seen midfielders, the first thought was, can I influence the game by playing forward? Can I see that pass that's going to get in behind the opposition's back line to score as a goal? Has the coaching system changed where keeping possession of the ball is more important than looking for that forward pass that can open up an opposition's defence?
Well, I'll speak for myself, and maybe we'll kind of generalise a little bit about the coaching profession. There has been a little bit of that creep into it, where I don't know if either of you guys have been to the what they call the exit trials here in the UK. Once you get released from academy football, there are tons and tons of players who, like you say, can play sideways. They'll go get the ball. They'll be neat and tidy and all that. They're the ones that are probably released. The ones that are picked up are the ones that have a multitude of those tools in the box. So
got to be effective. If
I'm coaching, just to answer Ray's question accurately, if I'm working with a midfield player, and he's behaving, we'll say, in that way, part of his learning program becomes, right, you need to be a little bit more dynamic in what you're doing. You have to see things earlier. Can we get to a stage where your first thought is that pass that opens you up? And then it comes back to their decision making about when, where, how, and whether I do it at all, because you also don't want the midfield player to smack every ball he gets forward either, and give the ball away. So that again comes back down to both your technique and your decision making. There will be, so if you look at Guardiola is a great example, because the ball retention and the era of it in affecting coaches is probably his baby, so to speak. He will choose, or that team's tactics will choose to only open you up when they're ready to. Whereas other teams might take, like the old Stoke team. We wouldn't call it a technical team, but they said, you know what, we're going to try play that forward pass earlier, because that's what we'll base our tactics around. Ultimately, by the time a player is 18 or 20 or 21, you want them to have as many tools in the bag as you can, to hurt teams, to retain the ball, and to know which one to do at what time.
I think when I look back... Sorry, right. Arsene Wenger was fabulous. Arsene Wenger had a philosophy, and Steve McLaren took this on to Manchester United, and I'm sure Ray was the same. If you get the ball, if you can pass forward, first time with quality and retain possession and break the lines, you do it, because one part, you can take 5, 6, 7 players out of the game. So that first thought has to be, can I pass forward? And Guardiola still has that. If you can't pass forward, then it's a case of getting at least 6 passes in to slow it down and see how the picture develops. And say Arsene Wenger did that, and then Steve McLaren took that on Man United, and then with England and Middlesbrough. And that was our philosophy. If you can play quality forward, that's fine. If that's not on, then you come back and you keep the ball. And we've even seen now with Guardiola, was it the cup final? I think it was Bravo. Just launched it down the middle of the pitch, and Aguero scored because it was on to do it. Right. It's not. Yeah. We've. I think people have taken it on to be it's possession for possession's sake, and it's not.
Yes.
It's possession for a purpose, to create that moment to then pass forward. And I don't think Ray's Liverpool team would have been exactly the same as that. They'd have been no different from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, Ray, I just want to... We have to take a little break here. Off the back of that, Shred, I wanted for you to continue to talk about this, and how you look then at a coach has that individual development within that team scenario, particularly if it's outside the professional game with certain players possibly more able than others. We'll talk about that with Ray Power next